Hello, good evening. A warm welcome to tonight's event. We are dealing with the topic Waiting for Europe, EU enlargement in an era of uncertainty. Thank you very much for your interest, and thank you also to our four excellent speakers and the excellent moderator for being with us tonight. My name is Gerhard Machel, and I'm representing the Karl Renner Institute, the political academy of the Austrian Social Democrats, where I'm responsible for European affairs. This event, jointly organized by the IAP, which is hosting us, the Austrian Institute for International Affairs, and the Karl Renner Institute, is another element of a series of events, workshops, advocacy meetings, etc., that we are organizing in the framework of an initiative called Young Generations for the New Western Balkans. We founded this initiative actually also already 8 years ago, and I would say it's a success story. We have been organizing, as I said, many discussions like this, workshops, and we also traveled to the region, to the European capitals, to Brussels, in order to advocate for the cause of the Western Balkans, in order to advocate for EU enlargement, especially in the Western Balkans. And we've been doing this with quite many young activists, experts who come from the region, and we tried to give them a stage in order to, so that they are able to come forward with their hopes and expectations from Europe. Waiting for Europe, Montenegro and Albania seem to be quite close already to the accession. The negotiation talks with Montenegro proceed quite quickly. Yesterday, only 2 other chapters were closed in the negotiations with the EU, and the country hopes to close all the 33 chapters by the end of the year. And Albania, too, is moving quite quickly. But as we learned today in a workshop that we had, the progress in the negotiations is not really reflected on the ground. What we see in Albania now are huge protests against the government, against also the opposition, against the whole political elite. What we see in Montenegro is that, progress is not that, visible for the civil society as it is reflected in the negotiations. So there is still much to do on the ground in order to bring the countries to the European Union. I really look forward to the debate that we have. Before that, I hand over to George Loka, one of the representatives of the IAP, and I would like to thank him and Hannes Swoboda and Marilia Huscha of the IAP for the good cooperation, and many thanks also to Vedran Djic from the Austrian Institute for International Affairs for the cooperation that we have. Thanks a lot. I wish you a fruitful debate. Now, George.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, hello, everyone. My name is George. Gerhard already introduced me, so thank you for that. I don't need to bother saying much, but I wanted to kind of discuss a bit more about what we said earlier in the closed door discussion at the Renner Institute. So thank you, Gerhard, for first hosting that. We not only discussed Montenegro and Albania in terms of EU accession, but we also discussed Georgia specifically, and also the wider Western Balkans, with a focus on the student protests in Serbia. And it was very interesting kind of getting to see the differences between the protests in Georgia and its EU prospects versus that of Albania and Serbia. Very different scenarios, however, still the wish remains the same. It just manifests very differently. I come from the region myself. I'm from Albania, so it feels very refreshing to have such an initiative actually be on the ground and sort of serve as a platform for us young people to discuss how it would feel like to be finally part of the EU. The EU has become an ideal. When it comes to Albania itself, Rama has specifically stated that it's his vision and his dream to join the EU until 2030. But what does that mean about the youth? What does that mean about the youth? We have brain drain across the whole region, and that is because, well, regardless of how much EU accession is progressing in the region, that doesn't necessarily translate to the ground. So I first and foremost want to thank every single workshop participant and the speakers for actually delivering us the harsh reality. It's refreshing to have these conversations in a more honest way. So yeah, now to kind of drive away from the bottom-top approach when it comes to EU enlargement, we have the panelists here who will discuss more so the technical aspects of it. So I just want to thank every single one of you for showing up. And yeah, Vedran, I'm leaving it up to you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you, Gerhard. Thank you, Hannes and IIP for hosting us, and thanks to the RANA Institute for the partnership. And thank you for joining us on this wonderful summer evening. You know, in Vienna, there is never a proper time for public discussions. Today, it's very nice, not too hot. In 2 days, it's going to be too hot. 5 days before, it was raining. It's never the best time, but you are at the best place right now if you want to know where the enlargement stands. And then certainly Vienna is a good spot to discuss the topics of enlargement, as when I look around the 27 member states, one of the strongest supporters from the very beginning on was Austria. Anyway, we just discussed a bit before we came out here to the panel that there are so many developments and issues going on right now. Just a few days before, we saw all those mainly male leader of the 6 Western Balkan countries and heads of states and governments coming to the Western Balkans summit in Tivat in Montenegro. We heard of non-papers commissioned, published, presented by German Chancellor Merz and French President Macron. Just a few days before Tivat, there was a proposal for Ukraine. We hear that countries see all these developments differently. Of course, Montenegro wants to join as soon as possible. Albania and Edi Rama probably don't know what to say nowadays, given the power and the strength of the protests, of the protests that have been not only taking the streets of Albania for 17 days, but they're also in the headlines of European newspapers and global newspapers for quite some time. So a flamingo is the animal of the hour. So if you want to wish to buy some toy animal for your kids, it's going to needs to be flamingo these days. So we have Albania, interesting developments, but at the same time, just yesterday, Ukraine and Republic of Moldova opened first chapters in the negotiations. Georgia is lagging behind. We discussed today in the morning. And despite all this kind of a dynamism, we still have crucial questions unanswered. So, is the EU ready and willing? How is the situation in the member states? What are our French colleagues telling us when it comes to the enlargement, because they are facing elections in 2027? And of course, we need, also when it comes to Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, but also the Western Balkans 6, we need to look deeper behind the surface and the slogans, actually. You know, slogans can fool you sometimes coming out of from those governments. So we have an interesting range of topics. We will have a very dynamic discussion on the panel. I'm going to introduce my panelists and then also ask you for the Q&A for some comments so that we have a dynamic, nice summer evening enlargement debate. So to introduce my panelists, starting from Olga Pindyuk, She is economist at the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. I always have to read it and to be on a safe side, because in German it's a totally different name. So that's a good trick. And Olga has been working so much on Ukraine, but also on the geoeconomics and on corruption. So I think we're going to have a fresh insight from that point of view on where Ukraine stands and how it relates to the whole process of enlargement. Because, you know, obviously the big elephant in the room is Ukraine and not Montenegro. So that's. I mean, Montenegro is always the biggest, despite being the smallest, but still. Next to Olga sits Donika Emini. She's a member of the Balkans and Europe Policy Advisory Group, as I am too. So we are friends from the same group, advocating for the enlargement of the European Union, but more fundamentally advocating for substantial transformation and democratization of those societies, because enlargement sometimes is one piece of the puzzle, and the second piece of the puzzle that we want to see is actually the deeper transformation of society. So Donika just published, I saw it today, a comment on the Kosovo elections, on the outcome of the Kosovo elections. So if there is one single person in this city that has the best expertise on Kosovo and on that part of it, that's Donika. Next to Donika sits Ulrike Hartmann. She comes from the Austrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. She used to be ambassador of Austria to Bosnia and Herzegovina. You were also working for the Office of the High Representative back in the time, and now you are the head of the Department for Southeastern Europe and EU Enlargement. And we do know that focal point and primary interest of the Austrian foreign policy is Western Balkans still, so sitting in a very important position. And last but not least, Hannes Svoboda, president of the International Institute for Peace. And you just said today and underlined that you were the last rapporteur of a successful member state. I mean, of member state that joined 2013, Croatia, a long time vice president also of the European Parliament, and someone who knows all the pros and cons and deep seas of the enlargement as no one else. So. Thank you so much for being here. And as Ukraine and Moldova just opened the first two chapters, and yesterday President Zelensky joined the G7 summit. So Ukraine is, of course, always on the agenda. But this time, enlargement is also taking the central stage in the debates, besides the war and the efforts of the European Union to support Ukraine. Olga, seeing all this kind of a dynamism and now opening of the first chapters and actually the rush or the need for rush that we see on the side of Ukrainian government, do you see Ukraine accelerating, pushing, knocking on the door so heavily that the door will be then opened soon? And what are the challenges right now, also from the geoeconomic point of view?
Thank you. Well, I would argue that actually it's not only Ukraine that needs to get into the EU, but the EU has come to realize that it badly needs Ukraine for matters of its own economic security and security in a broader sense. The war, Russia's war in Ukraine, has accelerated the understanding on the side of the EU of the current economic geopolitical reality, and accepting it, because it felt for a long time that the EU preferred to, get stuck in this. There are these 5 stages of grief, and the first one is denial. So just let's pretend that things still can function as they used to be, and if we play by the rules, the world will eventually also cooperate. But this war, it just showed that the world is no longer as it used to be. And the EU, I think, understands more and more that the EU enlargement, it's one of its most successful foreign policy tools, and should be seen as a strategic investment into the EU's own security, because global alliances are falling apart. Their partners like the US, which were considered to be as reliable as they can be, are no longer there. And having countries on board, sharing your values, being a part of your bloc, this is really crucial. There's been, I think, also a bit of resentment on the side of the Western Balkans because Ukraine is perceived as having some kind of unfair advantage, having moved through these initial stages of the EU accession process so fast. But on the bright side, I would argue actually this benefits the Western Balkans because it catalyzed the EU enlargement process in the Western Balkans as well. The EU is now moving as fast as it could, but probably everyone would agree on the panel, but maybe not. It's actually interesting to have this discussion, that the speed is not fast enough. And what this recent developments in the enlargement process have highlighted is that the internal EU institutional mechanisms, they need to be changed so that the countries do not get disillusions and do not believe that they have any credible prospects of joining the bloc. There are many problems with how the EU functions. I am not an expert on that, but probably the need of the unanimous decision-making means that in one of the examples where the problems arise and the enlargement process can span 20 years or more because there is a need to have agreement of everyone on each and every small issue. So this is probably not the most efficient way how to advance. And if the EU indeed is adamant that the EU enlargement has to happen in a foreseeable future, then this enlargement process needs to be changed. You mentioned this non-paper and what Mer suggests. There's been initially also this kind of reversed enlargement procedure aired, but it didn't find much of support among crucial stakeholders. I mean, it's difficult to really say what's the second best solution here. Probably, having this staged accession wouldn't be perceived too well in the EU candidates, because I think, given the past history, this would be seen as a very much stalling of the process of enlargement. But there needs to be some kind of, anchoring and strong policy goals which the candidates need to meet in a timely manner. Otherwise, they will look some other way. It needs to be a carrot and a stick. So not only that the countries need to be ready to close the next chapter, but also that they get some kind of reward for that, and that they are sure 100% that the EU enlargement is not just an empty promise.
Thanks a lot, Olga. Peter Magyar in Hungary did provided extra great support for Ukraine indirectly by winning over Viktor Orban, who was blocking the process for a while. But then still, when you look deeper into the sentiments in the member states, and quite often the question or kind of a claim that the Ukrainian government does not have the capacity, that the corruption is widespread and intrinsic, etc., that they can't deliver. What will be your answer to these kind of arguments and claims that the government can't deliver, that the corruption is like a cancer? And
I mean, I wouldn't deny that Ukraine indeed has corruption issues, but it would be an exaggeration to say that the Ukrainian corruption issues are unique in terms of their scale. And I would also say that the amount of the reforms that the Ukrainian government has been able to do in the recent years under the conditions of the full-scale invasion is a very strong evidence that the country is capable. It's by no stretch a failed state. It's a capable government. It does needs a lot of kind of reinforcement and not a straitjacket, but very strict conditionalities attached to all sorts of loans and financial assistance programs to advance. This is just like basic game theory. Actors are always, they always have incentives to cheat, to free ride if they are allowed to. So this shouldn't be allowed. And one more thing which I could say about corruption, I actually think that the fact that these corruption scandals are so loud and so publicized, it's actually the evidence that the government is trying to fight them. Because in the past, the corruption was much more widespread, but no one even really heard about that as much. So I think it's a strong evidence that the country is moving in the right direction and, not hundreds, it's not A+ performance, yes, but in the B range, I would say.
Yeah. Great. I think this is an important argument to be voiced and heard. And just a very, very quick last one. I mean, all the enlargement processes also depend on the support by the population. So you need to have a pro-European sentiment, and we do know that, for example, Serbia has a kind of a non-strong support, and some other countries are more optimistic. Is the population in Ukraine still as enthusiastic about the EU enlargement as it was actually a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's still the case.
Yeah.
That can be lost, but it's still the case. The EU accession is very much still popular among the broader public. And there is very strong civil society, which I think is also important. It serves also as kind of checks and balances for the government and reinforces this drive towards the EU accession. And I think this would be like really helpful, the civil society factor, going forward and making sure that the government does indeed perform all the necessary reforms.
Thank you so much. Danica, now to you. I mean, we keep having this kind of a notion of front runners, back runners, lagging behind, all this stuff. And some experts argue actually that we should judge the quality of and the strength of the process of enlargement by looking into the weakest candidates. And certainly Kosovo, with 5 non-recognizers from the EU, is certainly the weakest part in this chain of now 9. Okay, we forget Turkey all the time, but I think Turkey we should leave out. The nine countries, including also Georgia. I would love to. And Kosovo, in the meantime, was not so much in the media focusing on enlargement issues, but rather on elections. So now Kosovo is overtaking all the others as a world champion in the density of elections. Now you just had another elections. So my question would be. Kosovo, where it stands right now, does Europe and European enlargement figures in public and political debates? Where does Kosovo stand? What's the prospect? And then the second part of the question will be to your neighbor, to the south, to Albania, because so much happening there. And Gresa Hasa gave us an important and wonderful introduction today in the morning. So Gresa, hopefully you can then jump in the Q&A and give us more hints on the Flamingo Revolution. But if you could comment on those lagging behind a bit.
Well, I mean, we are all lagging behind because also the front runners are not front runners. I mean, I don't like this qualification, although for the EU it's important to show how are they progressing in a bureaucratic tick-a-box exercise. And if you look at it from that perspective, then there are front runners. In terms of quality, I would argue differently. And, that's when I always, at least in the past years, yes, enlargement became more geopolitical, but also enlargement is not about democratization anymore. Europeanization is not equals democratization. The normative power, the transformation power that the EU had does not have anymore. So now the EU thinks strategically, and it's important to, maybe because of Ukraine, maybe because they want to prove to themselves, but also to others, that they can enlarge. They can take small countries. Montenegro wouldn't make a huge difference. And Albania was also fast-tracked. I mean, if you look at the countries in the Western Balkans, Albania is actually the fastest moving country. Because, I mean, back in the days, I mean, Albania started becoming relevant in the Western Balkans map with the Berlin Process Summit, when Edi Rama and Vučić sort of became the leaders of the Balkans and the epicenter of, you know, this Balkan leadership. And both are dealing with a lot of issues in the countries. This gives a clear picture.
Have issues or they're dealing with issues?
Both. And that's why, you know, like, this is important to start with. Then there are the laggers, and, you know, you are from Bosnia and Herzegovina, I'm from Kosovo, and we are the countries that actually you cannot find anywhere in the map. And there is no, if you ask me if there is a qualitative discussion, debate about EU integration process in Kosovo, the answer is no. Because, I mean, we were never there. I mean, when the methodology changed, I was invited to talk about the change of methodology, but like, what kind of methodology? It wouldn't apply to a country that is not even a, you know, candidate country. And then, you know, there is staged accession, gradual accession, and all these initiatives. Even with the latest non-paper, Kosovo can access only one of the steps, but you can't actually benefit a lot from this, you know, whatever gradual, whatever plan that is out there. Because, I mean, there is a lot of quantity, there is no substance, there is no quality. What all of this reflects is some realization among member states that ratification will not happen, enlargement will not happen, as we know, as Croatia wasn't, you know, and this is not because the EU doesn't want it, this is because of the French. And, you know, we came back from Paris recently. We went on a trip. The MFA is very much willing to work on enlargement and all, but then there is a ratification process, which is the elephant in the room. And I think all these plans, in a way, they signal that we realize that ratification is not going to happen, but under these circumstances, this is what we can offer. And this is roaming, this is SEPA, this is, you know, even, you know, the economic integration, which are all good, beneficial to the citizens, but they don't transform the region. So then it puts all into question, big question mark. Will it really be beneficial at the end of the day? And that is something that we wouldn't know. Currently, Kosovo, going back to Kosovo, like, yes, we in Bulgaria, I guess, we still have a lot of work to do to sort of beat Bulgaria in organizing elections and changing governments. But yes, we just had elections, 3 pairs of elections in 16 months. So if anybody wants to learn how to organize elections, we can provide lessons, because technically they are very well organized. There is no fraud, and it's, you know, it's quite a smooth process technically, not politically. Whether we are going to have a government or not, it's also a big question mark. You know, sometimes because at least after December, we thought that with Vedvendossi getting like 51% in a multi-party system, what else would you want to have? When we fail to form the institutions, now we really are kind of fearful of having any kind of prediction. What I really am disappointed in Kosovo, because it's usually blaming the EU, the non-recognizers, and how, you know, slowly, almost like not really showing any softer approach towards Kosovo. With the growth plan, Kosovo was included. There was no asymmetry. Kosovo was able to join the growth plan. Although we were under punitive measures, we were given access, equal treatment, and what Kosovo did is first failed to ratify because we didn't have a parliament, a legitimate parliament to vote. And then we just missed deadlines. After unlocking the first tranche, we now are losing maybe around 90 million euros, and that's a lot. And that's a lot only because, you know, the US has retrieved from the Balkans in terms of investment. although in Bosnia it's a different question, but now there is this gas project. I think we should also talk about that, because that's also very important. But also, we're losing 90 million and the ability to engage with the EU bilaterally. Marta Kos came to Kosovo and there was no room to engage bilaterally and technically with the government to sit and work together, but rather just coming to meet an acting president, acting prime minister, acting EU head of office. Also, the EU office has, an acting director at the moment, and the entire country is transitioning in the most unpredictable way, and this is very daunting. We will definitely come back to what is happening in other countries, because also North Macedonia is forgotten. And what is happening in North Macedonia? Sometimes there are some meetings, but like now is a silent sort of country in which no revolution, no protest, nothing is moving, but it's not in the right place. Montenegro is moving fast, but like this acquis, Kosovo, sometimes we would ratify probably 50 laws in 1 hour. And in the parliament, but then the implementation and the actual adaptation into the system, that's a different question. Serbia, now, are we even talking about the integration process in Serbia? And Bosnia and Kosovo always remain, there. So in general, it doesn't look like a positive picture, although in Tivat it was not. It was a lot of men in the picture. But anyway, like it looked like there is a lot going on, but nothing at the same time, which is very typical in the Balkans. You have the daily dynamic, which is exhausting, but then process-wise, things just remain there, like not moving.
Danica, would you say that now you argue actually that there is a kind of fake dynamism when it comes to the enlargement? So you mentioned bureaucratic ticking boxes exercises. Your parliament could pass 50 laws, etc., etc. Would you again asking you on the neighbor to the north? Would you argue that the pink flamingo revolution in Albania is doing more positive contribution to the fundamental transformation of Albanian society and Europeanization, if you wish, than the process of the EU enlargement?
Well, it's a very good question. These revolutions are very tricky. It's a good thing that they are happening. And everybody talks about flamingos. Yes, it is about flamingos, but Albania has been degrading environment for years. And we see the same people who are in like now, because in Albania it's very interesting, Grace, I will talk more about it, because the traditional media did not report, the influencers took over, and not, political influencers, like fashion influencers. So you would see the TikTok sort of generation kind of revolution, and they took over, they became global. Candace Owens, for whoever knows her, it's not good. So basically, the most far-right person in the US, who's like full of propaganda, she was talking about Iran. I swear, if you ask her where Albania is, she wouldn't be able to tell you. But I think, the combination of Kushner and Trump's and this, investment triggered. But, what happened in Albania is exactly what I said in the beginning. The exercise of ticking boxes works perfectly. Kos and Rama have the perfect chemistry. They even committed to climbing the Korabi mountain together when, they finished some clusters. So you could see that there is an interpersonal, connection, which for Albania was very good. If there were reforms internally, Rama is probably the best leader in rebranding a country like Albania, because, even France and Netherlands, 10 years ago were like completely against, they turned into the biggest supporters. But what Rama failed was the internal reforms. And now there is a revolution. The revolution is quite problematic because we have seen the Arab Spring, we have seen the Wall Street, we have seen a lot of this kind of mobilization. And in Serbia, the thing is that leaderless movements, they tend to sort of gradually either get weakened or lose power or lose purpose at some point. And I think now they are standing at a very crucial point. If there is no face, like for instance Djindjic during Milosevic, you had a face, you had a leader, you had someone to look at, you had someone that you could vote. then it will gradually sort of lose its power. But yes, in terms of sending the message, it is to both the Serb protests and the Albanian protests are sending the message. Governments are failing, governments are being appeased by the EU strategically, but we want more. But if this more is going to happen or not is really up to the time. But, you know, I'm not trying to be skeptical, but revolutions are like, I always use Finding Nemo analogy, because, like, you know, Finding Nemo is like this fish in the aquarium who wants to go to the ocean so much, and they manage to go through the sewer system, and then when they go in the ocean, they go like, oh my god, like, now what? Because the ocean is so big and they don't know what to do. So and this is, you know, the case in Albania. The state capture, the fact that, you know, it's not 15 years, it's since the 90s. Sali Berisha and Edi Rama have been there for a very long time. The opposition did not stand a chance. In Albania, the system does not allow you. And this is all this accumulated sort of rage that we see, but also fun. Because also tourists are joining the protests. So I guess it's a very good atmosphere in terms of, you know, challenging systems that are not there for its citizens.
Okay. I mean, that's particularly interesting in the Western Balkans. I mean, two big kind of protest movements, social movements at this time in Europe. So it's not that protests just pop up. So actually, there is something happening deep beneath the surface of the political, and we will certainly come back to it. Ulrike. Of course, Austria has been supporting the process of the EU enlargement for a while. Austria also has been arguing for gradual integration last few years. How do you see now the new dynamism? So, first of all, very concretely, how would you judge the Macron and Merz paper, non-paper? And secondly, also your comment when it comes to Ukraine and Moldova, because this is certainly a bit of a different situation. And what's the position of the Austrian government when it comes to Ukraine and Moldova?
Okay, thank you very much. Regarding the non-paper, let me first clarify. I mean, they stole our ideas. Because not only that you mentioned yourself that it was an Austrian invention, this gradual integration already a few years ago, but let me also remind you that it was just about a month ago we had another non-paper. I mean, of course, it's a paper. So what does it mean? But the idea is, since what we have seen so far regarding gradual integration, it was mentioned about SEPA and this roaming and these ideas, but it's been relatively little and slow. So we said we need to speed up this gradual integration, which, to be very clear, has never been meant and is not an alternative to full membership. So full membership is the goal. This sometimes comes up as this might be alternative. It's not, definitely not. But we see that even this gradual integration has been slow, as I said, and so the idea was to, and we see that with this French-German non-paper, it goes in the same direction. It means moving towards areas which are in the internal market. As I said, nothing is still decided upon. These are ideas, but they have more and more support within the EU. And ideas like if, for example, certain chapters in certain areas are closed, why shouldn't then these candidate countries in these particular areas not already participate? Not without voting rights, but already participate. Because what is so essential is that ordinary citizens, especially in the Western Balkans, that have been waiting for so many years, I mean 23 years when it all started in Thessaloniki, that they don't just hear about EU integration process, but they also feel it. What does it mean for them personally? That's why it's so important to have these very practical examples. Apart from the population, that they see certain benefits. What does it mean to be EU member? What kind of benefits are these? It's also there are also ideas of benefits for the political elite. For example, why shouldn't, if certain chapters are closed, why shouldn't then the ministers from the candidate countries not participate in council meetings or in the European Council? Again, without voting rights, but discuss. Because it's not only that they see how the dynamism within the EU works, but we see them as future members. And why shouldn't they at least also discuss and give their input about, for example, about ideas, how they see the future agricultural policy of the EU, because they will be affected. So to include them would also give a signal, you're not just third country, as in many other areas, you're part of it. So this is the whole idea about gradual integration and about these non-papers. But again, as everything else, usually within the EU, I mean, it takes time, and now is the question how to put these ideas into practice. It's, yes, I said going into the internal market, but it's not just the entire internal market. You need to pick the areas where it's possible, and of course, areas where candidate countries have already aligned. Without alignment, it's definitely not possible, because what everybody agrees among the member states that the enlargement process needs to remain a merit-based process. Because in the end, it's about the functionality of the EU. We cannot accept new members if they don't apply the same criteria, the same rules, even in the technical areas, as the EU itself. So this is about functionality. And there was a discussion on this also when it came to Ukraine. Because there were so many ideas floating around about reverse membership, associate membership, etc. But the question is, how would that work in practice? It was said before, these ideas, they didn't fly. Because let's be clear, for all these decisions, you need unanimity. And that's another issue, unanimity. Yes, we are discussing also the question of unanimity versus qualified majority. But again, in order to move towards qualified majority, we need at least one unanimous decision to do it. And although we as Austria, we are in favor of qualified majority, but let me be clear, limited to the enlargement process. So I'm not talking about qualified majority for many other questions. But when it comes to the enlargement process, we would be very much in favor of this qualified majority, because we have seen in practice what it means, and we saw it with now with Hungary, with the previous government. We see many other examples where it's maybe just one member state that has an issue, maybe a bilateral issue, and delays the entire process. We want the ball always to be in the candidate country. So not for the EU to delay something, but let the candidate country prove that they can do the job. And that's why, for example, we are also very much in favor for Kosovo that finally this accession request, the application, that this is finally being dealt with in Brussels. Because then the ball would be in the Kosovo court. And then Kosovo has to show, now they can say, well, we would do, but the EU doesn't even deal with it. But when the ball is in their court, then they need to deliver. And then it's for the EU to put pressure on. So in that sense, we're trying to, as long as the at least certain technical conditions are fulfilled, we would like to the candidate country to prove, is it willing to do the reforms? Is it willing to deliver or not? I think for
Right. Non-paper, and you also touched upon the qualified majority issue. I was going to ask Johannes how he sees that. But Ulrike, one additional question, which is more political than technical. So we do know that Austria has introduced sanctions against Milorad Dodik. Milorad Dodik is still an important player in Bosnia. You were ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina. And at the same time, the another big political question that we need to put on the table that is the fact actually that the biggest country of the Western Balkans, 6, is, according to VDEM and all the other standards, semi-autocratic at best, and that now Vučić regime is struggling. So how do you position it? Interesting to know, how do you position yourself as an Austrian government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to those kind of tough political questions? Because yes, we do have the process of enlargement, but we do know that this is fully loaded with political questions all the time. So do you have a kind of a, I know that the answer, there is no optimal answer and positioning to this one, but how do you navigate those political questions?
It's true. It's not. There is no simple answer to that. I mean, as I said before, I mean, we usually want the ball to be in the candidate country's court. So also when we talk about Serbia, I mean, for years, the Commission has been suggesting the opening of Cluster 3 and saying that the technical conditions are there. At the same time, we know, of course, what's going on, that also about human rights situation in the country, about measures, about measures also that are taken towards the movement, the students' movement. So it's not easy to argue. On the one hand, we want Serbia to proceed, but let me be clear, we want Serbia as a country to proceed. And we do not see a progress as a support to a government. It is the country, because we see Serbia and the entire enlargement as a long-term project. And it is in our interest, as much as it is in the interest of the candidate countries for them to become members. Because at the very beginning it was said, it's more than ever, it's a security question. Not only in relation to Ukraine, but also in relation to the Western Balkans. So it's in our own interest. So we see this long term. And let's not forget, if we halt a process, this also means to lose time, because the technical process alone is a long process. So it's not a clear answer. On the one hand, yes. On the other hand, what kind of signal do we give? And for Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is a clear commitment from the EU that certain conditions have to be fulfilled until the next step. It's about these two famous laws. Unfortunately, we are still stuck, and we have been waiting for years for some progress, but haven't seen proper progress in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, of course, elections are upcoming. Everybody talks about these elections now, so before these elections, we don't expect any progress. And then after the elections, we will have to wait for the outcome. Whether it's not for us to decide or to say whom we would like to have in the. We always look at the EU integration process, and all the parties have said they are in favor of the EU integration. But it's not enough to say it, they also have to deliver. So we judge a government or parties according to what they also do in relation to do they deliver, do they pass laws, do they implement reforms, or don't they do that? So and it's not only us, it's all the other member states that have, with this, as you know, with this new methodology we've had for a few years, where the member states have a much greater say in the entire process than before. So the one thing is what the Commission says, but then it's also the member states that sometimes go into great detail in each question and say, well, this is not good enough. So you need to do more. So it's not only what Austria says; you need the agreement of all 27 to come forward. So as I said, it's not a clear answer, but the situation is not clear and not easy.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ulrike. Hannes, in all those debates, sometimes we have the feeling that experts and member states and countries forget the historical memory and memory of the enlargement, which has from the very beginning on of the existence of the European Union been the basic pillar and the most effective policy of the European Union. And when you worked on in the European Parliament and worked on the enlargement of an integration of Croatia, which was the last one, you did it in the middle of the enlargement fatigue. So actually, after 2004 and 2007, there was a huge enlargement fatigue. Croatia came in Croatia we can count to this kind of a wave of 2004, 2007. From that kind of a historical point of view and the fact that we entered a deep enlargement fatigue back then and that we have now the new dynamism, my question will be, do we have, and you have the historical memory, you remember the last 3 decades, 4 decades of European integration. Do we have a kind of a changing moment? Is this the new era? Is this the new time for moving forward for Europe? Or are you skeptical given all your institutional knowledge and memory?
Well, we had endeavored not only a non-paper, we had a non-decision about the principal way how to proceed. We had decisions on individual countries, but not on the procedure as it should really work. Going back to what you said, if you look to we had this big bang of 10 member countries, and we had Romania and Bulgaria, and then we had Croatia. All, perhaps with some exception on Bulgaria and Romania, and you see it still today, all these countries and the leaders of the countries, very different leaders, had one aim: to do the reform, at least decide on the reform, even if not always implementing it, to get into the European Union. Of course, I was mostly engaged with Croatia, and whenever I went to Sanader, who was the prime minister at the beginning, and I said, look, there is no reform on judicial, no judicial reform progress, he immediately, when I sat there in his office, he called the minister came, and we discussed it, and he said, look, you have to do that and that. There was a willingness, and you know, I was a social democrat, Sanader was not a social democrat, and also his successor. There was a clear willingness. There is no willingness really to do the job in any of the countries. We spoke about Kosovo. Well, he plays with election. He has no vision what to do about, well, he has a vision, but the vision is not in compliance with what is necessary to join the European Union. Serbia, with Vučić, we know about him, what his interests are. In North Macedonia, yes, it's very unfair what Bulgaria is demanding, but they could find some way to have an agreement, even with Bulgaria, with the help of some European countries. And Rama did until recently, most of the job he had to do, but now it is more important to have to please Mr. Kushner than to please his own citizen. And of course, we have, and we heard today from Zara about what happens in Montenegro, and there's some progress, but behind that progress, there are many still conflicts inside the country. Then, of course, we have a different situation with Ukraine and a very difficult economic but also psychological situation. Think about what happens if the war hopefully ends soon. People will return or will not return. There will be a split in the country between those who had stayed in the country and those who will return will be accused. Yeah, you went out and you had a funny life in Austria, in Germany, and now you come back and you want to get the profits out of whatever. It will be difficult, but it will be a long process. But this is also due to the EU reluctance to go forward with a strong message to the countries concerned. Very often ambivalence, not really clear, and of course the long time spent between starting talks or partner negotiations and now. Now, because I fully agree with what Ulrike said, but what really would have to be decided, say, okay, we start with everybody, with all the countries, in some sort of an association, not an association agreement in the proper sense, but we are one community already now, but you have to do the job. And then everybody can see how far Serbia is progressing, how far other countries are progressing, and who is lagging behind, who maybe is even going backwards after having some progress. And of course, there is a lack of strong personality on the EU side who say to some countries, please finally stop that ugly game about Kosovo. Recognize the country is existing. Don't play. You know, Mr. Sanchez, my dear colleague, social democratic colleague, he is a coalition with the people from Catalonia. He could easily say things are done. We are one country. We do our reform internally, or decentralization, whatever. At Kosovo, if they recognize Kosovo or not, will not change the situation, or in Romania or in Slovakia. And no leader is here who says anything. I remember very well when Kohl once said, I think he said to Poland, if I still remember well, he said, in 5 years you will be a member of the European Union. I thought, he's crazy, how can he promise? But on the backside or the behind side, I have to say, he had the courage to say it. It was not 5 years, it was maybe 10 years, I don't know exactly, but he said, you will, and I will do everything to go forward. And there's no leader who said the Bulgarians stopped that kind of nonsense to speak about the Middle Ages and what happened and what kind of languages or king in the Middle Ages has been responsible for North Macedonia or not. But this is the debate. I was present in one of the debates in one of the seminars. So we have that kind of lacking leadership in the region to do the job they have to do, but we have that lack of leadership in the European Union to really start a new process. As Ulrike said, with all due respect to Austria, Austria was one of the government who took over the ideas, but the ideas, I think in about 10 years or even more, presented in one of the institutes in Belgrade and one, and Bruegel, I think, was institute, or the SEPS Institute in Brussels. So it's on the table already, and it should be on the table, not as a non-paper, but as a very specific proposal to go a different way with the enlargement process and to invite everybody to start the negotiations, give everybody a chance, and then you will see who is doing its job and who is not doing the job. This would be the only way, and it was not done in Tivat, and therefore it was a missed opportunity. I mean, even France and Germany should have proposed it already before, maybe also together with some other countries like Austria, make a very concrete proposal, send it around before that, and not being the hero of Tivat without really bringing things forward. But again, yes, I think because what you said about the separation, the democratization process and the sphere geostrategic processes, I think one should lead the two together. I think we need both. We need the geostrategic elements of it, of course. That's especially Ukraine and Moldova, but also all the countries of the Balkan. It's not so easy, of course, with Vucic to find a solution, but I don't see any separation of the two, confessing that the European Union's capacity to change in the long term, let's say maybe in the long term, but not always in the short term. But take the example of Hungary, and with this I want to close. You had a transformation, you had even, Orban was, first he was knocking in Austria to the Social Democrats to be member, then with the Liberals, and then with the EPP, and finally he went his own way. But at least the European Union, with all the criticism about the Commission being too timid, finally, in combination with the local forces, with the leader Peter Magyar in Hungary itself, could reverse the backward tendency of Hungary. So I think we can, in a cooperation, we can do it together with the local forces. And this is, I think, what the European Union and the Commission should always say. Look, we alone cannot change the country's internal structures and policies. But together with the people inside the country, we can do the right job and create the structures that they can bring the countries on the right way. If a country doesn't want, if Mr. Vucic says, look, I'm not going to change my friendship with Mr. Putin or whoever, or China, because of the European Union, okay, let him outside. Sorry to say that, but I think the people inside the country will say, Mr. Vucic, that's not the way we want to have you behaving.
Thank you so much. Hannes, before we open the Q&A, I would just like to pose a quick question to all of you, if you can answer in 2 or 3 sentences on the US and the European integration. So US used to be an ally, supporting processes, etc. And now it's, of course, obviously has turned into a different kind of an animal also in the region, and also when it comes to Ukraine. I mean, now all are afraid that Trump is going to pop up again and start some peace negotiations. And they're telling him, please don't touch it again. So we've seen it so many times. So the question is not, I mean, the transatlantic relationship is in shambles. The question here is, can the enlargement process be a kind of an emancipation for the Europeans from the United States? Or to ask differently, is the US going to be adversary in region? I mean, Bosnia, we haven't touched upon, but we see actually a kind of a clash, a direct clash between the US and the Europeans. What would be your quick take on the position of the US? Because we can't erase the US from, and we shouldn't. So, Hannes, starting with you.
I think we should have a clear line. We should not see the US as an adversary. Of course, it doesn't make sense because they are too strong. But we should make clear to the local leaders, like Mr. Rama, is it more important to sell an island to Mr. Kushner, or do you want to join the European Union? And the same should be also on Bosnia, including also the position of High Representative. We cannot unite on a High Representative or cannot agree on it. There will be no High Representative, and we put our questions in the enlargement process. So I think, yes, without provoking Mr. Trump, because it's not the US as such, it is the Trump family, but now it's one thing.
There is, of course, a new US strategy of the State Department focusing on the Western Balkans too. So, Ulrike, your take?
Of course, I would also say it's not an adversary.
Of course
but it's
not,
of course true that when it comes to the Western Balkans, that we see a completely different policy, and different interests. No support for the civil society, withdrawal from many different kinds of financial support. So this is a fact. Their interest, it's clearly on the economic commercial field. At the same time, in order to be successful, the US, as we see, they certainly have an interest in stability. So I think the US would remain engaged in the sense of making sure that there is no instability, let's call it like that. So in that sense, we can definitely cooperate. Where I have some concern is especially and we saw it also in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it might also be the case in the future in other countries, that in the commercial field, that deals are being made which are not according to EU rules. So the EU is supposed to react. Because what we expect is, of course, these countries already now, as candidate countries, to play by the rules, talking about public procurement, etc. So there could be more cases where there is this kind of clash of interests. But I also agree, in the end, the countries and the leaders have to decide long term. What do they want? Do they want this closer relationship with the US because of certain profits? Or do they want what actually, and let's not forget the people, except maybe Serbia is a little bit more than half, but for all the other countries, the population is to a large extent in favor of joining the EU. So I think we should never forget that also we see also these reactions from the civil society, be it in Serbia, be it also in Albania. In the end, they show what they want to do. I'm rather concerned about those countries where we do not see. I don't say demonstrations, so I don't want to use the word revolution, but where we do not see an active, a vocal civil society. That's why the civil society and the EU is constantly talking also about the important role of civil society. Because without the civil society, you cannot have this transformative, you cannot transform the country towards the EU. Sorry, I went further than US.
First of all, I mean, I have to say something on Kosovo. As BIEPAC, we wrote a long time ago on, why it's important to not only grant the candidate status, but open negotiations with all countries and then just, let the competition to be open. And for me, it was more disappointing because, also, when they talk about Georgia, they talk about people of Georgia because people want the EU. It doesn't matter what the government wants. We give the candidate status. And in the case of Kosovo, it really doesn't matter what people want, We are like more than 95% pro-EU. And in the case of Kosovo, it was just like tensions with Kurti, which, Kurti is incomparable to the leadership in Georgia. Come on, like he could be a stubborn leader in the case of Kosovo-Serbia dialogue with his also legitimate reasons, to be honest. But, it was never confrontational against the EU. Actually, in the beginning of his mandate, he was probably the most pro-EU leader in terms of, proactiveness. He was the one supporting Lajčák more against Grenell to then, really, really make a grave mistake, I would say. To Ukraine, I didn't say this before, but we were never not jealous, but like we were never sort of thinking that it was unfair that Ukraine and Moldova were fast-tracked. We were just too cynical about our process. So I guess like all this disappointment that we had internalized for a very long time, we're just like telling you that you're going to hit the wall. And when you hit the wall, it's not going to be pleasant because we had a lot of walls. As far as the US is concerned, it is a bit hypocritical to ask the candidate countries to stand up to Trump when the EU is hiding. Most of the time, they're hiding behind von der Leyen. So von der Leyen takes the front and Rutte, but it's never member states. Or member states, they do it sporadically. Sometimes Merz says something and then retrieves, and then Macron is here and there in some speech. But in terms of, standing up to Trump, no one actually dares to do it, because you either think of Ukraine, you either think of Greenland, you either think of, what if we anger him to the point that, tomorrow we will never know what's going to happen. So I guess this unpredictability, which Trump plays very well, has, sort of created this fear. You kind of retrieve without even, asked to, being asked to be retrieved. But I totally agree, because what will happen to Ukraine if the US and Russia compartmentalize their, presence in Ukraine? And does it go against the SAA and the association agreement, or what is happening in the region in Bosnia? Basically, all the gas that the infrastructure that is being built is more than you need, so it's becoming a hub. And in Kosovo, there is constantly an OPED being published, or there is pressure about the gas, and making specific agreements. And in Albania, I'm sure that they will move on with it. They were eyeing Serbia before. The only question is like, okay, you don't want to be dependent on Russia. You would still prefer the US, but what kind of US is going to be in the future? Because what the EU leadership makes a mistake is in believing that when Trump goes away, the things will bounce back to where they were before. But Vance probably has a even grave projection about Europe than Trump, because Trump is realtor, is a business person. Vance has also a political project attached to it. So we have to think about all these, and maybe for the EU and Europe, it's a wake-up call, because strategic autonomy, and I'm not saying that because of, the French, but also to China and Russia is also important to the US to finally wake up and create something that is more sustainable than, creating this dependency. And it's not only on energy and gas, it's artificial intelligence, data centers, clouds, and all. These are so deep that in the future, there are going to be like monsters that we will have to deal with. And last, on the member states, I mean, yes, Hungary was an issue, but now that Orban is gone, not all problems have been fixed. Maybe the Ukraine issue has been fixed to a certain degree. We still don't know; it's quite unpredictable. But in terms of future of Europe, in terms of enlargement in general, it's not there, because probably it was never Hungary. I mean, Hungary you could point for different, for numerous issues, but the future of Europe, what kind of polity we want. Like QMV, it's good. QMV fixes technical issues, but in the end, it's what is the future of the EU, and that is a question that we all have to answer at some point.
Yeah. Olga, I think we could now go for hours on the US and Ukraine, but what would be
a couple of sentences. I will be really brief. The US apparently has been playing by its own rules. It doesn't want to follow any established rules and actively undermining the established world order. What has been successful in resistance to it, it's like China's example. China has a lot of leverage in this relationship because it has monopoly in the critical raw material sector. So a natural, strategic geoeconomic approach for the EU would be to increase its leverage through increasing the strategic autonomy, through building up alliances of these middle powers, have currently put it, etc. And I see quite a lot of steps in this respect. The EU has intensified, this work on the foreign trade agreements, Mercosur, etc. Some other countries, India, a major step. This, I think, what would be a natural progression, just to make sure we have a lot on our side as bargaining chips, so that we cannot be really manipulated that easily and squeezed out anything what the US wants. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Now it's time for you also to comment and ask questions. And as we mentioned at the beginning, we started with Albanian protests. I would love to ask Gresa, as she is also a strong voice of Albania and of the protests herself. She is publishing papers. She's a part of the active Albanian diaspora. Gresa, if you could just in few sentences tell us actually what is at stake right now and how important it is, not only for Albania, but probably also for the larger picture.
All right, I'll answer your question in a little bit. I just wanted to go a bit to Hannes' question a bit earlier when you said that can a leader like Edi Rama afford to sell an island to the members of the Trump family, or here listen to his citizens and make sure that Albania joins the European Union? Well, I think that he can do both, as we can see. Just recently, and by recently I mean today, Marta Kos, Marta Kos directly aligned with Rama's government on this issue, saying publicly that the EU has guarantees from the Albanian government that the Albanian government will oblige to environmental laws and Chapter 27 of the Acquis. And this felt like a slap on the face to the thousands of protesters in the streets of Albania. And the reactions are very interesting to see, because people are very frustrated at the EU at the moment. So are journalists. I'm also speaking about independent journalists, intellectuals in the country, because they feel that the European Commissioner is aligning with their semi-authoritarian leader, against whom they are protesting now since 17 days, and they are not being listened. It's very interesting that compared to other countries in the region, the EU during these massive protests is still a factor. You have signs that protesters are keeping addressed at the EU, asking the EU if you can see us, if you can hear us, if you can help us, like trying to form like a corridor of communication. And this is not happening because they are completely being ignored by the EU. Their problems are not being addressed at all. So what is at stake? I think that, I mean, this, I think this could just, I think that, you know, like it could just contribute more to Euroscepticism, and we've seen this in other countries as well. I don't think this is good if people perceive that the EU is an ally of Rama and it's not an ally of democratic forces on the ground right now. As Donika mentioned earlier, Marta Kos already has created this image in Albania. Like, she's way too friendly with Edi Rama. They speak about, I don't know, going hiking together. They speak about, I don't know, their preferences on basketball and stuff like that. You know, people do not like that. They really don't like Rama, and they certainly do not like Marta Kos and how she reacts. What is at stake here, I think, is, I mean, this brings me back to the question of EU integration. I don't think the question anymore is if Albania or Montenegro will join the EU. I think the question is how this accession process will look like. Will this just be, you know, an exercise in geopolitical expediency, and it looks like this, or will this be accompanied with real democratization process? And we don't see the second happening, actually, because whatever is being spoken or happening formally does not match at all the reality on the ground. And I don't just refer to the protests, but I actually refer to everything that's actually happening. At this moment in time, since for the last year's elections, Albania can de facto be considered a single-party state, because Rama's government controls literally every institution, media is captured, the civic space has shrunk. Right now, you have a lot of rage and you have citizens in the street. But if we speak in terms of civic movements, there's not, you know, there's not as lot of civic movements as it used to be 10 years ago, for example. A lot of activists have left the country. Some of them have turned into political parties. So, yeah, the situation is very complicated. People in Albania do not feel that if they will become part of the European Union, their reality will change. Their life will become better. And I think this matters a lot. So,
Thank you, Gresa. I saw a few hands, so we have four or five questions. We will collect and then come back to the round, to the panel.
Yes, hello. My name is Giovanni Del Re. I'm an Italian journalist for the Italian newspaper Avvenire. I came to Vienna after 20 years Brussels, and I heard a lot of this enlargement issue. And I have two questions, one for Mrs. Hartmann and the other ones for the other side, let's say. And we speak a lot of reforms that the member states have to do. But in Brussels, I had also another narrative that, well, you know, Europe is not ready, should be reform itself. Otherwise, you see what happens with Orban. One country could block the whole process in many issues, and so on and so on and so forth. So for Mrs. Hartmann, my question is there, don't you see the danger that actually this gradual approach could actually be also, a plan B de facto? Because, if you look at France, for example, and many other countries, it's not very easy to have the ratification. And to Mrs. Emini, Mrs. Pindyuk, do you really believe do you really trust that the Europeans, the EU is really willing, or don't you have the fear that maybe there is some kind of a hypocrisy from the European side? Because, talking to the diplomats in Brussels, you have a really different picture compared to what is said officially. We need, it's very important, we need, and then you talk with the French, and sometimes the Germans, and many others, and they say, well, we have to take time because you don't know what happens with Europe, and so on and so forth. That's my two questions. Thanks, Europe.
Thanks, George. You can pass the mic. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Aleksandra Joksimovic, Director of Center for Foreign Policy. I'm coming from Belgrade. I'm so glad to be here to see so many friends and like-minded people. I know most of you very well. I won't speak about Serbia at this point because we are not front runners for quite a time. What I wanted to ask you, Vedran stole one of the questions about the United States, but the other one that I wanted to hear your opinion, let's say, after a long period of enlargement fatigue, very unfortunate events brought new enthusiasm to the process. So the strategy of current Commission is that new enlargement is going to happen during this mandate. Time is running very fast. Is it going to happen or not? We have two scenarios. One scenario is Montenegro is coming in. They have elections next year. So it's kind of milestone as well. If Rama survives invasion of flamingos, then they're going to be second country in. And I don't believe that anything else could happen by the end of this commission. Even I think this is too enthusiastic, what I already said. So what the day after? Because, there were so many disappointments in the region because of lack of the enlargement process. At this point, I think we have more changes of methodology than enlargement itself. So is the whole process going to be continued a day after mandate of this commission, or it's going to be lost with wind? Ukraine is the elephant in the room, but anyway, they sacrificed a lot to be put aside as well. So, there are so many questions that still have no answers, and the best scenario still is looks still very disappointing as well. So, what do you think about day after?
Yeah, that's not good if the best scenario is not good enough. So we have, yes, here, lady.
Hello, my name is Taida. I come from Montenegro, studied and living in Vienna. I was wondering just to Frau Hartmann and also to the others, second part of the question. So if you could foresee or imagine what could happen if 2028 or 2030 does not go as promoted. So what would be the kind of implications to the EU's public image and the impact of that no enlargement situation, and the impact in candidate countries, for example, the Montenegrin specific situation of the polarization in the political system, and how could that be an impact? Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks a lot. All easy questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Elisabeth Campestrini, and I'm very grateful for this very inspiring discussion. Einstein once said, if a problem starts on one level and it's not being solved, you have to enter a completely different level. And looking at the Berlin process and all the developments so far, I want to come in with a thinking out of the box approach. First of all, making use of the fact that we look at the youth initiatives in Serbia and in Albania from very different perspectives, of course, but they move things. And as you might know, I come from human rights, so I will focus on economic, social, and cultural rights now, whereas, of course, political and civil rights in these days have a great importance as well. However, I think looking at the impact that the current situation has on the severe violence on economic and social rights, and health is, of course, part of that, and environmental standards as well, coalitions can be established. And I was thinking of RAICO, for example, from the Regional Cooperation Council. Since many years, young people have engaged to contribute to changes. And I will bring in another elephant in the room, which is the environment and health situation in the Western Balkans overall. And one of the reasons Friedrich Ebert Stiftung evaluated that for a long time, why people are leaving has to do with the fact because the environmental situation has clear impacts on the health situation. So people want to leave because of this reason. Now, there are digitalized tools worldwide that are able to deal with this already. I look at the example of Kosovo. The daily measurement of the air pollution can be translated into alarming information, digitalized health management, and other potential improvements for patients. And this is a process that has already been developed in other countries, evaluated, monitored, and worked. Hence, to cut the long story short, I would suggest to bring together in those workshops that you mentioned today, these young people developing ideas how to transnationally cooperate together. The issues don't stop at the borders. Environment and health concerns don't stop. And I strongly believe that with these people that we have here in the room and many others out there that have done the work already, such changes are possible. Sometimes I'm a pathological optimist, but I think this should also come into the discussion.
No, this type
Thank
of pathology we like. Good. One last question. I see one. Oh, two questions, of course.
I'm Rowan from Vienna. I think we still have the crucial problem that decisions in the EU have to be made mainly anonymously. And I don't think it's very wise to let join other countries before this problem will be solved. Otherwise, we will have this always the same time that what Mr. Orban did permanently to annoy the whole European Union and to blackmail all the others.
Good. That's the point. We picked up a bit on this qualified majority unanimity. And last but not least, a short comment.
Thanks a lot for this opportunity. My name is Günther Fehlinger. I run the Austrian Committee for NATO Enlargement. My question is if we should not treat the allies better who are already committed to NATO and also supporting Ukraine militarily and supplying weapons like many of them do, and some other countries like, for example, Serbia, which is really misbehaving consistently. The behavior of President Vučić before the Tibet summit when it comes to treating Montenegro was beyond the acceptable. sending his policemen on this airplane and blocking the border and really bullying Montenegro in an outrageous way. It's in line with his behavior towards Kosovo and towards Bosnia. But I cannot understand why the Austrian foreign ministry and the Austrian political establishment continuously talks about the Western Balkans must be in the EU. The Western Balkans, that means Serbia. And Serbia in no way is behaving like a country which really wants to join the European Union. How can we keep this illusion up? Because it's discrediting actually the enlargement process. Because we cannot seriously go to the Austrian population and say that Montenegro is ready, when at the same time we say, yes, all of them are ready, and this includes Serbia, when Mr. Vucic makes statement and behavior which is really humiliating for the European Union at the global stage, and praises China, supports Russia, and behaves in that way. So we lose the credibility of the whole process, and therefore then it will all fail if we continue this. So we must be country by country, and Serbia is absolutely not ready.
Thanks. Many questions, and I don't think that we can answer them all, and there is also some time afterwards to talk bilaterally. But I would suggest that you pick and choose one or two that you think are the most important, and then we also continue a bit. Olga, do you want to start, and we make the big
sure.
last round on the panel?
Whether Ukraine should trust the EU, that it really means it. I think in the case of Ukraine, it's probably quite a strong yes, because Ukraine is perceived as a very strong, potentially a very strong asset for the EU, as it's really richly endowed with all sorts of critical minerals which are needed for the EU strategic autonomy. And also it's really now well recognized how crucial Ukraine is for the European defense efforts, because Russia has been not so shy in terms of using all sorts of cyber warfare, and especially countries of the eastern flank, Baltic states and Poland, they treat this threat very seriously. And Ukraine actually is the only country in the region which has enough expertise, enough technologies to be able to boost the European defense. So that's, I think, a very strong argument for the EU to advance the enlargement process. And this, you mentioned unanimity of decision making. I would argue that there is a bigger fundamental issue for the EU. It's lack of deep enough integration on so many levels. The countries which are the EU members, they act as if they are not really part of the bloc. It's a financial market, is not really a common market, etc. And I think for the EU project to survive, and given how strong the hostile forces have been growing, it needs to hold together, deepen internal integration, and continue to stick to the values and cooperate.
I mean, I want to trust the EU, and sometimes I also want to at least see Montenegro in to prove that it can happen, because Montenegro is a small country, cannot have a detrimental impact on the EU. You can be Croatia within the EU. You don't improve it significantly, but you also do not make it worse. You continue the trajectory of the reforms and gradually sort of swim along. But I'm not skeptical. For me, it's just concerning that we don't only have multi-model, but we have a multiplayer game. Because you see, member states are betting on their horses. You see, like France is obsessed with Moldova, but also with Serbia in the region. And then you have Germany, which is more into Ukraine. And then you have specific countries supporting specific players. So it's not just multi-model, it's also multiplayer. So you don't see a clear message coming from the EU, and this is quite distracting. What will happen when it doesn't happen? For me, that was the question, and that's the most concerning thing, because we have to deal with the aftermath. like in North Macedonia, they bet everything on NATO and the EU. The EU did not happen, and then everything went wrong. It could be even more wrong because this time the stakes are higher. This time we are guaranteeing membership. We are not guaranteeing opening of negotiations, and this is difficult. The far right parties are gonna definitely leverage on that. Oh, in Serbia, I know Dacic was making fun of the EU constantly after they failed North Macedonia. And then in Montenegro, the government will go down because all eggs are in the EU basket and they are betting on everything, for this EU project. And when I asked people in Brussels, they said they have a new, also gradual accession kind of model. You get a badge. Apparently, you get a badge that you have finished all the chapters. And then, with that badge, you sort of lobby around Brussels, which, for me, I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. So yes, the badge for me was very scary. So that is, and for the person who has a question, if it's going to happen, maybe it's going to happen within this commission, but only the closing of the clusters. Because you can do that technically. And Marta Kos can really wash their hand in the commission, saying that, we shepherded Montenegro and Albania. Montenegro closed all. Albania has prospect to close by this date. We green-light it. And then ratification can take like Romania and Bulgaria forever, or Kosovo like for visa liberalization. We were green-lit by the commission for like, I don't know, like more than 5 years. So then the ratification process is up to member states, and member states, good luck with that. I mean, elections in France and all kinds of dynamic which are completely unpredictable. So yes, to badges, maybe we will have those. And don't get me started on environment, because honestly, it is not only the countries or the foreign malign influences like China and Russia. Also in Kosovo, there were Austrian companies doing environmental degradation. The company that is investing in Albania is registered in Holland, in the Netherlands. So like it's a deeper issue. And for instance, in the case of lithium, the EU didn't really bother about environment when they wanted to push forward the Vucic agreement. So I wouldn't see it as a black and white when it comes to environment. The EU pushes for the green agenda, but then they also have like their gray areas. Yeah.
Green, gray, Ulrike.
Thank you. The question about is the gradual integration effective? We are not satisfied, I said at the beginning. So that's why we want...
In the end of the plan B, what we say is, well, the fact that there is no ratification and videos and so on.
I would not be that pessimistic. For example, also Montenegro now doing although internally I always try to be the devil's advocate, to see what could go wrong. Not saying that it will go wrong, but just trying to be realistic what could happen. Bilateral issues coming up, some interference from third countries, also problems with ratification. It all stands, it's all true. But if we're just trying to be negative, but let's be realistic. It can happen, but I think let's not underestimate a certain dynamism. If, for example, Montenegro has finished, and I say finished not only because the Commission says so, but because all 27 member states say so. Because we need these many, more than 100 unanimous decisions. Then there is a dynamism. Of course, it's parliaments that do ratification. But then there is a dynamism. And I do not exclude that even France, of course, it won't happen before the elections in France. But if we already now say, well, no chance, it will not happen, okay, what's the point of trying? Yeah. So I would not underestimate this dynamism, but the prerequisite is that the country, in this case Montenegro, but also Albania, has to deliver until the very end. So happy to see Alexandra after 20 years. Yeah, what happens if enlargement does not happen in this mandate? This is, of course, speculation. but we support Montenegro not only because it delivers, but also because it would be a signal to others. Because having served myself in the Balkans, I very often heard from people who are in favor of the EU that they lost belief. So that because it takes so long, so the EU doesn't want us, etc. So this would be a perfect proof that they are wrong, that the EU shows if the country delivers, the EU delivers. So that's why we are, and of course, each member state, and that's why we are really trying so hard, and also not only trying to support the candidate countries, but also do a lot of lobbying in Brussels and see the glass is half full and not half empty. And I'm also not so negative about this transformative process, because even in the past, I mean, the transformation of a country and of the whole society, this takes years. It's not from one day to the other. This day is the day of accession and then everything is different. Of course not. It takes a long time, but that's why it's also the civil society is so important. Yes, we have our interlocutors are the authorities, the elected authorities, are the parliaments, the president, the government. But with a strong civil society, the society then can push and create pressure to the authority to do the right thing. Maybe not tomorrow, but the day after. So we see this as a longer process. So that's why I'm not so negative. About unanimity, yes, I said it. I said it before that we would be in favor of having more of qualified majority decisions, but what I would also clearly say, let's be very careful, because if you remember, there was a few years ago, it was before 23, that France had the clear position, first a deepening of the EU, and after that enlargement, which we didn't agree with, because what signal do you send to candidate countries that they are doing reforms, but they are told you have to wait, no matter how good I am in doing the reforms, but you have to wait until we internally have reformed the EU, the system. After 23, France changed this position in his famous speech at Lopsek in I think in Bratislava, I think. Yeah. So it changed. So of course, as I said also at the beginning, we are aware that functionality has to be guaranteed in the future. But we can't have this as a parallel process. We can talk about these institutional changes, but at the same time proceed with enlargement. So where's the problem to have this parallel process? And let's not forget, for Montenegro also, we had, just a couple of weeks ago, we started the negotiations also about the accession treaty. The accession treaty, it's also a way of having, and this is not something unique for Montenegro. We had it before. In these accession treaties, there are so-called safeguard clauses. So there are ways of also in the sense of, let's say, protecting the interests of member states, of protecting the EU. So we can have this as a parallel process, but it would be very dangerous just to halt the process until the EU has reformed. And regarding Serbia, again, as I said before, we see Serbia as a country and see this as a long-term process. We don't talk about Mr. Vučić or other leaders in Serbia. We talk about the country. And we support all 6 countries. And all 6 of them have to deliver until the very end to fulfill their criteria. And if Serbia, at least in certain areas, does not deliver, then it will not proceed. But we still support Serbia, once again, the country, because it is important for the region, as we see all the other countries important. So just saying let's forget about Serbia for the moment until we have a new government, I think this is not the right way to proceed. Thank you.
Thanks, Ulrike. Johanna.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. 3 points on the unanimity. First of all, we have to say not many decisions, but on foreign policy and defense policy, we have unanimity. Many other issues, we don't have it. But I want to agree with what Olga said. We have many other elements where we need reform and strengthening of the European Union in the financial market and many other elements. So a strong European Union will not be achieved if we just abolish certain elements of unanimity. It should be, of course, concentrated on new members. Of course, here you need that kind, but not on all the processes. Many people say it would not be necessary for opening and closing chapters to have a unanimous decision, but you could do it with majority. And I think, and that comes to the second point, I don't understand the argument against this stage process. I think even because it will be difficult, because we don't know what will be the end of the process, it would be important already to take everybody in to start with everybody on this process, and not, say, with some we start negotiations, with others not. No, it would be much more important to say everybody is welcome, everybody should show what they can do, what they will do, if they are willing to do it, and according to their reform process, they will proceed in that process, coming closer to the European Union. So that everybody, also of the citizens, can see, look, and can ask to their own government, why didn't you do the job? Why are we back? Why, maybe I even said back, or why don't we proceed as far as our neighbor country? So that, I think, would be the real good decision. On Serbia, I think it would be nonsense to exclude Serbia, not only because of the principal issues that Ulrike mentioned. Do we want to have a new conflict with Kosovo? Do we have a new conflict also with Montenegro, even if that crazy decision has been taken, or this police or bullymen have been sent to Montenegro? We don't need that. So, of course, we do have to challenge Serbia and the president, but I think it would be a disaster to exclude Serbia from the whole process. I think that does not help. Finally, on the question of Commissioner Coase. Well, I'm not a man of defending the Commissioner. I'm from the Parliament, so to say, my background. So all my speeches were against the Commissioner or against the Council. But first of all, what I heard about Coase until now, she's promoting the whole enlargement issue. So that's the positive element of it. The real question is, of course, how sensible is the Commissioner in relation to the citizens, especially when they are protesting. We know that from Commissioner Hahn from Austria was not very sensible about the media freedom in Serbia and so on. And the other one was not only not sensible, he was contrary to what he should have done, dear colleague from Hungary, who is no longer commissioner for enlargement, unfortunately. So there's one element. The second is maybe Commissioner Coase is right when she says she has all the promises. The Commission cannot say, I support a civil movement which is against, is not fighting illegal acts, but acts which are against the interest of the citizen. But of course, it would be helpful if commissioners are more, let's say, not align themselves with some of the leaders. I would never go with the leader of any country for hiking whatever. So it is good if we had a good commissioner on this issue. He was a Finnish, and the Finnish are not very emotional. They are very clear and very sort of maybe sometimes even frozen emotions, because that gives the wrong impression. I think this kind of going together with the bullies, with the national bullies, is not good, is not helpful. But anyway, that does not mean that EU already is saying yes to what is doing. So yes, and this is my end, because we had this discussion already in the afternoon about the question of dissenting movements, resistance movement. We have, by the way, on the 25th year discussion about resistance movement in Eastern Europe, especially in Russia, Ukraine also, and in Belarus. I think the European, including the Commission, should be more sensitive on the question of the democratic, as I said before, on the democratic involvement. Von der Leyen, and I think I'm not criticizing her, she is promoting the geostrategic commission, which should have been done already before, and has this kind of strategic alliance, and as Olga mentioned, renew a trade agreement with others, and has the whole issue of supporting Ukraine and trying to come to some terms with Donald Trump. What is missing in the Commission now is somebody who is going more towards what has been mentioned, the human rights issue, the democracy issue, enlargement also as an element of spreading democratic values, or at least of promoting citizens' interest in democratic values. And I think that part of the enlargement process is missing, and I think that would be a mistake, because that was also what we said in Austria. It's a question of not only of economic interest, but of being also part of a community of democratic states and democratic nations and democratic societies. That is what Europe is about, and not only on the economics, because that was also the foundation motives of the European Union was not economic. Economics was an instrument, but the foundation was to overcome hatred, to overcome prejudices, and overcome all the authoritarian rules. And we should not going back from that kind of position of founding, not myth, but founding motivation of the European Union.
Great, perfect closing words. Thank you, Hannes. Thanks, Olga. Thanks, Danica, Ulrike, Hannes. We haven't discussed the fact that the EU enlargement needs a support from the constituencies in the member states. The Austrians are not supporting the EU enlargement right now to a large majority. It's a minority of the people. But what we do, and this is the contribution of the panel of discussions of our group on working with young people, we do create a kind of a public. We wanna put these questions on the table and discuss it. That was one of those pieces. We had the workshop in the morning. We will be continuing. So check the web pages: International Institute for Peace, Arena Institute, OIP, publications coming up, events coming up. We have some snacks, not smacks, but snacks. Smacks will be. We also have smacks, but not for you. So snacks and some drinks, and we can continue discussing on some of the issues that were brought on the table, on the panel. Thank you so much. It was very rich. Thank you for joining us, and see you just around the corner. So.